All right, so the PS5 Pro presentation just ended. And I feel like this presentation was actually more surprising than what I was initially expecting. Now, if you've been watching the channel, you probably know that, I was actually interested in the PS5 Pro, going into this presentation. There are certain games that I would like to see improvements for. Games like Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, and there's a few other games like Wukong and maybe Dragon's Dogma 2 if they can improve that at all. And we did get confirmation for several of those games at this showcase that they will get an improvement with the PS5 Pro. Now, how much of an improvement, that's something that we're probably going to have to wait for an analysis for. From my own experience, one recommendation that I would have for really any kind of hardware is to, maybe wait for some type of an analysis. Because, these companies, they're going to market their products in a way that hypes them up as much as they possibly can. So it's always a good call to just kind of wait for some type of technical analysis review from somebody like Digital Foundry. They're going to go a lot more in depth than what PlayStation did at this presentation. But as far as their presentation is concerned, they really talked about three core pillars. One is that the PS5 Pro will have a larger GPU. Two is that it will have better ray tracing capability. And three, it will have their new AI upscaling method, which is PSSR. Now, personally, I think PSSR is the most exciting of the three. I'm very interested to see if that can be comparative to something like NVIDIA DLSS. This will make image quality just much more crisp if that's the case, and that is something that we've needed on some of the newer games like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. If you played that game on performance mode, its image quality was not great. It was very, very blurry, and the hope here is that PSSR will make a major improvement to games like that specifically. And that's actually something that they mentioned at this presentation that I thought was very interesting. They said that 75% of the time people are choosing performance mode on a PlayStation 5. So the market is absolutely spoken by this point. We want 60 frames per second experiences, and I feel like this is something that developers really need to learn. We've seen various games over the last year or two come out with 30 frames per second experiences, and there's been backlash every time that's happened, and while there's some people that will defend that, based off of Sony's statement, that's only 25%. And that's all the more reason that I have to ask why developers are prioritizing graphics modes. We want good performance, and I can even ask, why is the PS5 Pro needed in the first place? If developers would just develop with frame rate in mind from the beginning, then there would be no need for the PS5 Pro at all. It kind of feels like this type of thing happens every single generation where there's certain developers that just tries to do more than what a console is even capable of. The market has spoken. They want 60 frames per second, but some of these developers just aren't listening. And I think to a degree, it's even worse this generation because I feel like graphics are almost to the point that there is diminishing returns. We've gotten to a point where visuals can look amazing, and you can do that at a 60 FPS experience. But we've seen time and time again, developers just are not developing their games that way, and that's where the PS5 Pro comes in. Sony's selling point for this console is that it's kind of the best of both worlds. You're going to get fidelity mode and performance mode kind of combined into one package. Now, how well that's actually going to be implemented, again, I feel like we're going to need a better analysis from somebody like Digital Foundry. But I think the current question right now is, if you want something like this, at what price? Because, and I couldn't believe this when I saw it, but they ended the showcase by revealing its release date, which will be out November 6th. Pre-orders will go live on September 26th, and then its price tag will be $700. I want to say that again, $700. And oh, by the way, this doesn't include a disk drive, and it doesn't include a stand. You're going to have to buy both of those things separately. So in reality, if you have disc-based games, whether that's on the PS4 or the PS5, if you have any intention on playing those games on this PS5 Pro, you're going to need to buy a disc drive for an extra $80. So after tax, we are talking about a $800+ console. I mean, to an extent, I understand that this is a niche console. It's not expected to replace the current PS5 or even sell a fraction of what the current PS5 is already selling. But my question is just, how niche do we want this thing to be? One thing that we really learned last generation with the PS4 Pro is that these mid-generation refreshes are niche. Most people are not going to opt to buy the more expensive model for minor improvements. There was a report that came out in 2020 that revealed only 14% of the PS4 user base owns a PS4 Pro. And, you look at that console, and it actually launched at a really good price tag. When it launched, it replaced the price for the original PS4. So it came out at $400, and then the original PS4 actually decreased in price. But instead, what we're seeing here with the PS5 Pro is that the original model is actually going to stay at its original price tag, which is $500 if you want the disc-based model, $450 if you only want the digital version. But now for the PS5 Pro, you're going to have to pay an extra, $250 to $300? I mean, they're asking a lot from their fan base here. If only 14% of people bought the PS4 Pro last generation, what are we looking at here with the PS5 Pro? Less than 10%? Less than 8%? I mean, what are we really looking at here? It's just really hard for me to believe that this thing is going to sell a lot of units at this price tag. I mean, is this Sony just kind of testing the water for the eventual PlayStation 6? And that's a question I have to ask. What's the price tag going to be for future consoles? Is this going to become a normal thing? I mean, I sure hope not, because I think a lot of people will leave gaming if that's true. Even with inflation and everything, that is just a significant increase from what consumers are used to. So, no, I don't think the PS5 Pro is going to sell incredibly well. I think what's going to happen is that when it first releases, it's probably going to sell out. But that's more because early adopters are going to buy it no matter what. And then scalpers are going to try to see if they can make some extra money out of it as well. And that's something that I want to note here, because I think once we get outside of the holiday period, once we start to hit Q1 and Q2 of 2025, I think the PS5 Pro is going to be fairly easy to find. So don't fall for any type of FOMO effect this holiday. If there's any kind of shortages for the PlayStation 5 Pro, I think that's going to be a short-term effect. So do not pay extra for the PlayStation 5 Pro. This is not going to fly off shelves the way the original PlayStation 5 did. I mean, even for myself, just kind of based on the rumors that we'd been hearing, I was actually interested in what the PS5 Pro had to offer. I was relatively convinced that I was going to pre-order this thing. But the one thing that I really feared was its price tag. I had mentioned that I thought it might end up being the most expensive console ever made, but my fear was kind of based on me thinking that it would possibly be $600 digital only. Little did I know I was still off by $100. I mean, this just reminds me so much of the PlayStation 3 launch. I remember back in 2005 when Sony infamously suggested that their fan base should work more hours to earn the PlayStation 3. I guess we're kind of back to that line of thinking again. And now I guess it's just kind of up to Sony to convince people that this is worth a $250 to $300 upgrade. And I feel like with this specific presentation, they didn't do a great job at that. What they did here is that they showcased the original PlayStation 5 next to the PS5 Pro, and they highlighted some of the improvements that the Pro version offers. And they kind of showcased games like The Last of Us Part 2, Spider-Man, and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. And I want to ask you all something about all three of these games. Do you think they already look good on the PlayStation 5? Because I absolutely do. None of these games necessarily needs a $250 to $300 upgrade, but that's the games they were kind of showing at this presentation. For Spider-Man, they showcased a tree that looks more clear. You can now see the individual leaves rather than being a little blurry. But I can tell you right now that I never played Spider-Man swinging around and thinking, I sure need to see that tree a little bit more clear. I never thought about that. I was just playing the game. I was having a fun time. I thought it looked good. Then they showed Ratchet and Clank, and they showcased the background. There was a crowd, and they were now less blurry. But again, I played Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. I platinumed that game, and never one time did I think I really need to see that crowd more clearly. I just didn't think about these things because the game already looked excellent. Like there's certain games that I feel like could benefit from the PS5 Pro. I've mentioned this before: Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Final Fantasy 16, games like Wukong, but those games are far few in between. Most games already look pretty good on performance mode. So I just feel like this presentation didn't do a great job at necessarily selling the improvements that the PS5 Pro has to offer. Now, maybe Digital Foundry can change people's minds when they make an eventual video, or maybe if more games start to need the PS5 Pro improvements, maybe more people will adopt it then. But for this presentation, I just feel like Sony did a very poor job at justifying a $250 to $300 price increase. Now, I will say that they did mention on their PlayStation blog that the PS5 Pro will offer a PS4 boost mode, and that could be interesting just kind of depending on what that actually means. You know, one thing that we've really wanted to see this generation is a 60 frames per second option for something like Bloodborne. And there's a lot of games on the PS4 that are stuck at 30 frames per second. So, you know, depending on what that PS4 boost mode actually means, that could be interesting. But they really haven't confirmed anything yet, which you would think that if it was a big improvement, they would probably have confirmed it already. So, I mean, I really don't know. Let me know what you all think about all of this. You know, what do you think about this $700 price tag? Do you think Sony has just completely lost their minds? And does this remind you of the arrogant PS3 days? Or are you just completely excited for this console? I mean, it's okay to have a different opinion. So let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. But I think right now, in some ways, this actually brings more questions to the table than it answers, because I think just kind of looking forward now, what does this mean for next generation? What's the price going to be for those consoles? And what about the future of physical media? Are we truly going to move to digital only for the next generation? And those are kind of scary thoughts to think about right now, but let me hear what your thoughts are in the comments below. Until next time, though, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and peace out.